There are souls in this world so pure, so tender, so untainted by the harshness of selfish ambition, that being in their presence feels like stepping into a sacred place. These are not perfect souls, no, not without flaw, but they carry something rare, something divine, a gentleness that listens when the world speaks in noise, a kindness that gives even when their hands are empty, a light that shines even when no one notices. And yet these are often the ones who are wounded most deeply. Why? Because evil knows exactly where the brightest flames burn, and it seeks to snuff them out with betrayal. Betrayal is never a mere action. It is a violation of covenant, a desecration of trust. But when it is done to a pure soul, the weight of that betrayal becomes something cosmic. It does not simply echo through time, it trembles in the realm of the divine. God does not take lightly the mistreatment of those who carry his fragrance. And while the betrayers may dance for a season in false victory, pretending their actions had no consequence, heaven records everything. The pain of the pure does not go unnoticed. The tears cried in silence are not absorbed by the air. They rise as incense before the throne of justice. And justice? True justice is not vengeance. It is divine reversal. It is the holy rebalancing of a world tilted by wickedness. When you hurt someone who is pure, you do not just hurt them. You wound a part of what is sacred. And what is sacred cannot stay buried. God does not permit innocence to be trampled forever. It may look like the wicked prosper. It may feel like the betrayer walks away free, but God is slow not because he is idle. He is slow because he is precise. The regret that haunts a betrayer is not always immediate. Often it creeps in when the applause fades, when the illusion of happiness withers, and when the soul, once proud, begins to feel the heat of divine exposure. Regret in the hands of God becomes a fire, not to destroy but to reveal. It exposes the truth the betrayer ran from. It forces them to look in the mirror, to see not who they pretended to be, but what they have truly become. And when that realization dawns, that they betrayed someone sent by God, someone who loved them purely, it is not a quiet realization. It is a burning one. The worst regret is not the kind that lingers in the mind. It is the kind that scorches the conscience. When God breathes fire into the soul of the betrayer, they don't just feel guilt, they feel torment. Every act of betrayal becomes a brand upon their memory. Every lie they told becomes a thorn in their side, and the joy they thought they'd gain becomes dust in their mouth. God doesn't need to punish with thunder when a burning conscience is enough. That's the divine irony. The fire isn't from outside, it comes from within. The very soul that thought it had won begins to collapse under the weight of its own sin. And while this fire burns in them, the pure soul they betrayed rises, not because of revenge, but because of redemption. God lifts the broken, not by pulling down the wicked, but by proving that purity never perishes in vain. He turns wounds into wisdom, pain into purpose, and betrayal into a badge of honor. The very suffering that was meant to destroy the innocent becomes the platform upon which their legacy is built. And God does this not in secret, but in the open, so that those who once mocked, once lied, once used, will have no choice but to watch the radiance of what they tried to bury. So if you've ever been betrayed, not just rejected, but truly betrayed by someone you loved with a clean heart, know this: heaven took note. And while you heal, while you cry, while you wonder why it had to happen to you, God is not silent. He is working behind the curtain of time. And the same betrayal that tried to break you will one day be the reason your betrayer burns with regret they cannot silence. They thought they won, but they didn't account for God. They thought they broke you, but they didn't see who holds your soul. They thought you were alone, but they didn't know. Your purity was your protection, and now the fire they feel is not your doing. It's God's. There is a sacred mystery in the way God watches over those who walk with a pure heart. While the world may overlook the silent weeping of the innocent, heaven never turns away. Every sigh in solitude, every tear falling in the darkness, every heartbreak endured without retaliation, it is all seen, recorded, and treasured by the one who calls himself a defender of the righteous. We often think tears are signs of weakness, but in the kingdom of God, they are offerings. They are prayers in liquid form. When a pure soul is betrayed, that pain does not disappear into the air. It ascends like incense to the very presence of God. In the scriptures, it is said that God collects our tears in a bottle. Not one is wasted. Can you imagine that? The creator of the universe so intimately involved in your suffering that he captures the tears you thought no one noticed. It means that even when your voice was silenced, even when your pain was mocked or ignored, God heard, he knew, and he did not forget. Betrayal is a violent ripping apart of trust, and when a pure soul is torn in such a way, it leaves invisible wounds. But those wounds are not invisible to God. The world may label you dramatic, weak, or too sensitive for breaking over betrayal, but God doesn't use the world's measurements. He sees the sincerity in your love, the gentleness in your intentions, the depth of your care, and when that sincerity is shattered by someone you trusted, he does not merely watch, he responds. Not always immediately and not always in ways we expect, but his response is certain, because God is not indifferent to injustice. He is the God who rights wrongs in his time. The tears of the innocent call out to God. They do not demand vengeance, they whisper truth. And truth, when heard by heaven, moves mountains. You may feel forgotten in your pain, but in God's economy, your suffering is sacred currency. The deeper your heartbreak, the louder your soul cries in the courts of heaven. And when a pure soul cries out, all of creation listens. Because purity has a resonance that echoes far beyond this world. It is often in these quiet, painful moments, when you feel the most abandoned, that God is closest. He doesn't always show up with lightning or miracles. Sometimes he simply surrounds you with his presence, comforting you in ways the betrayer could never understand. While they go on living, unaware of the storm they've ignited, God begins building something in you, something eternal, something holy, something beautiful born from ashes. But make no mistake, those tears are not just for your healing, they are also evidence. Evidence before God of the wrong that was done to you. Evidence that cannot be erased or denied. And when the time comes, those same tears that once stained your pillow will become the testimony that turns the tide. They will rise up as holy witnesses, speaking not of weakness, but of righteousness. And God, who is just, will not leave the righteous unheard. It is one of the hardest truths to accept, that just because God hasn't acted yet, doesn't mean he never will. When we suffer betrayal, especially as someone who gave love freely and honestly, the silence from heaven can feel unbearable. We cry out, expecting immediate justice, swift retribution, or at least some sign that God is moving. But instead we're met with quiet, and in that quiet, the enemy whispers lies. God doesn't care. You're forgotten. Your pain is meaning, but those are the words of deception, not of truth. What looks like delay is often divine precision. God is not slow. He is exact. He is crafting a response so thorough, so righteous, so undeniable that it must unfold at the perfect time. The problem is, our idea of perfect timing is usually right now. But God's idea of perfect is based not on urgency, but on eternity. He's not just responding to your moment of pain. He's orchestrating something that will shape your story, your healing, your future, and your legacy. God does not allow betrayal without purpose. He does not permit the pure to be wounded unless he is planning something redemptive. But like a surgeon, he must sometimes allow the cut so he can heal something deeper. And while you're focused on the pain of the betrayal, he's focused on the transformation it will produce in you and the exposure it will bring to those who wronged you. The betrayer may think they got away with it, but God is not distracted. He is patient, and his patience is power. Consider the seasons of nature. A seed planted in the soil seems lost, forgotten beneath the dirt, but in truth it's undergoing a transformation that requires stillness. If you dig it up too early, you'll ruin what was meant to grow. Likewise, if God moved too soon on your behalf, it might rob you of the growth that betrayal was meant to trigger. It might spare the betrayer from the full weight of their actions, but God allows delay because he wants the fruit to be undeniable when the time of justice comes. Divine delay is also a mirror. It reveals who the betrayer truly is when they think they've gotten away with it. And it reveals who you truly are when no one comes to your rescue but God. It exposes the motives, the masks, the manipulations, and it prepares the ground for truth to rise like fire. God's timing is not only about healing you, it's about ensuring that when he moves, there is no confusion about who acted, why, and what the result was. It is divine storytelling, where your pain becomes the first chapter, but his justice becomes the final word. So don't confuse delay with neglect. Don't let the silence convince you that God has turned away. He hasn't. He's watching every moment, preparing every detail, aligning the heavens for the precise moment when your vindication will unfold. And when that moment comes, it won't just set you free, it will leave no room for denial. Those who betrayed you will be forced to face not only what they did, but who they became in the process. And it will burn, not because you asked for it, but because God designed it. There are moments in life when justice doesn't come wrapped in thunder or divine wrath from the skies. Sometimes justice comes in silence. And in that silence, regret becomes the loudest sound the guilty can hear. When God chooses not to strike the betrayer with visible punishment, it does not mean he is absent. It means he has chosen a deeper, more haunting method, one that reaches not the body, but the soul. That weapon is regret, and it burns hotter than any fire made by man. You see, regret has a unique way of finding its home in the quietest hours, when the noise of pride fades, when the audience disappears, and when the betrayer is left alone with their thoughts. What once felt justified now begins to feel shameful. What once seemed triumphant begins to taste bitter. And it happens slowly, painfully, relentlessly. The memories come back, not as nostalgia, but as judgment. The words they spoke to wound you now echo in their own mind. The lies they told now suffocate their own peace. That's how God works. He doesn't need to raise his hand when he can awaken their conscience. That conscience, once numb and hardened, begins to stir under the weight of truth, and the truth doesn't whisper, it screams. The realization that they hurt someone who only ever wanted the best for them, someone who loved them with sincerity, becomes unbearable. Regret isn't just remembering what they did, it's feeling the full emotional weight of what they destroyed. And God knows exactly how to turn that weight into fire. It's easy for the betrayer to pretend they feel nothing in the beginning. They boast, they deny, they move on quickly, but time is not on their side, because time is God's servant, and it has a way of circling back with truth. Eventually, they can't run from the image of what they did. They see your face in their dreams. they remember, the kindness they spit on, and no amount of distraction, noise, or denial can put out that fire once God lights it. This is not revenge. This is divine correction. And perhaps the most powerful part of it all is this: while they burn in the agony of what they can't undo, you are not the one inflicting it. God is. He is the one holding the mirror to their soul. He is the one letting them feel everything they tried to bury. And that's what makes it holy. Regret, in the hands of God, becomes both a punishment and a teacher. It teaches them the value of what they lost. It punishes them by making them live with it. This kind of regret cannot be escaped. It doesn't go away with apologies or distractions. It doesn't fade with time. Because it is not regret born of guilt alone. It is regret ignited by divine justice. And the longer they live trying to forget, the more they realize forgetting is impossible when God keeps reminding. That's the brilliance of how heaven fights. The fire doesn't consume the body, it scorches the soul. So while they walk through life pretending nothing is wrong, the truth is they are burning on the inside, and that burn is not temporary. It lingers because the pain they caused now lives within them, not as a memory, but as a fire lit by the God who defends the innocent without ever raising his voice. It may seem for a time that betrayal wins, that those who deceive, who manipulate, who cast aside the pure in pursuit of selfish gain, rise above. But what appears to be their elevation is often a setup for their fall. And what seems to be your lowest moment, the moment you were left bleeding by the ones you loved, is actually the beginning of your divine ascent. Because God does not let the pure stay buried. When purity is crushed, heaven responds not with despair, but with resurrection. Your rise is not a coincidence. It is God's direct answer to the injustice done against you. When someone betrays a pure soul, they believe they've gained power, but in truth, they've triggered a shift in the spiritual realm. They've touched something sacred, and when they do, they awaken the defense of heaven. God does not allow acts of cruelty against the righteous to end in silence. He allows them to go deep, to test your heart, to refine your spirit, but never to destroy you. The rise of the pure is not accidental. It is intentional, designed by God to show that what was meant to harm you has now become the very fuel for your transformation. Think of the countless moments you've wept in secret, the nights you questioned your worth, the mornings you woke up with heaviness in your chest. God saw it all. And while they forgot your pain as soon as they walked away, God never forgot. That pain was not wasted. It was deposited into the soil of your destiny. And from it, something unstoppable began to grow. You didn't see it, but while your enemies were laughing, heaven was planting. While they mocked you, heaven was preparing your crown. While they celebrated your fall, God was writing your comeback. The rise of the pure is not about revenge. It's about restoration. God elevates you not just to heal you, but to make a statement. The righteous may be crushed, but they cannot be kept down. He lifts you up so the world, and more importantly the betrayers, must witness the beauty of what they tried to destroy. Your healing becomes visible, your peace becomes unshakable, your presence becomes undeniable. And all of this happens while they're still searching for satisfaction in the very things that corrupted them. And here is the truth. They cannot stop your rise. They can slander, deny, and distort. But once God decides to elevate you, no amount of manipulation can hold you down, because your rise isn't dependent on them. It's born from the heart of God, the one who molded you in silence, who comforted you in pain, who lifted your face when shame told you to hide. He is the one orchestrating your elevation, and no human hand can rewrite what He has already sealed in heaven. What they meant as your burial, God has transformed into your stage. and the very ones who betrayed you will watch as you rise with peace, purpose, and power they cannot understand. Because purity, when tested, becomes strength, and strength, when blessed by God, becomes unshakable authority. They took from you, but God is giving back more than you imagined. And your rise will be the undeniable evidence that heaven always defends its own. The world often praises loud voices. It celebrates those who defend themselves with sharp words and accusations. It admires those who speak boldly, even when their hearts are full of deception. But in the kingdom of heaven, silence carries a different weight. Silence, especially from the innocent, speaks in a language only heaven fully understands. When a pure soul is betrayed and chooses not to retaliate, not to slander, not to tear down in return, but instead remains still and quiet in their pain, that silence echoes louder than 1,000 angry voices in the throne room of God. There is something sacred about the way an innocent soul absorbs pain without creating more of it. They cry in private. They wrestle with confusion. They speak to God, not to gossip. And while they are mocked for their quietness, misunderstood for their lack of response, and judged as weak for not fighting back, God is leaning in. He is not impressed by the noise of the guilty, their lies, their justifications, their twisted narratives. No, He is drawn to the stillness of the broken-hearted, to the tears no one else sees, to the whispered prayers that barely escape trembling lips. This silence is not born from fear. It is born from strength, the strength to trust that God will speak on your behalf, that He will bring clarity where you've been misrepresented, that He will expose what was done in the dark. It is one of the greatest demonstrations of faith to say nothing, knowing that heaven is saying everything, because in that silence, God hears what your soul cannot find words for. He understands the language of the heart, and He responds with justice that no human argument could ever accomplish. The guilty often rush to speak. They need to control the story. They twist facts to serve their image. They hide behind half-truths, hoping to bury the damage they've done. But the noise of the guilty always carries an expiration date. It fades, it changes, it contradicts itself, and eventually it crumbles under the weight of truth. While the innocent, who remain silent in pain, are slowly and surely vindicated, not by their own hands, but by the hand of God. This is not about being passive, it's about being anchored in the belief that your identity is not in what people say about you, but in what God knows about you. The silence of the innocent becomes a testimony, not of defeat, but of surrender to divine justice. And God never ignores a testimony like that. He honors it. The silence of the betrayed becomes holy ground. It draws heaven's attention and activates heaven's judgment. The guilty may laugh at your quietness now, but soon they will tremble at the voice God raises in your defense. Because when He speaks, there is no debate, no defense, no escape. And His words will pierce deeper than any accusation ever could. So, if you've stayed quiet when you could have lashed out, if you've kept your dignity while they tried to destroy yours, know this: your silence has been louder than their slander. Heaven heard it, and God is already writing the next chapter, one that will speak louder than any lie they ever told. There is a moment, divine and undeniable, when God decides that enough is enough. The games have gone on too long. The lies have traveled too far. The mask that the guilty wore for so long starts to melt. And no matter how skilled they were in pretending, how carefully they crafted their image, or how many people they deceived, when God begins to expose, nothing can stop the unraveling. It doesn't matter how clever they are. It doesn't matter how admired they became through manipulation. When heaven declares the truth must come forth, the exposure is not just swift, it's scorching. Masks are powerful for a time. They hide intentions. They shield guilt. They help the betrayer blend in among the righteous. They allow someone to smile while harboring cruelty. But God is not fooled by appearances. He sees beyond charm, beyond performance, beyond manipulation. And while others are captivated by what is seen, God watches what is hidden. He observes the betrayal as it unfolds in secret. He listens to the double-tongued words spoken behind closed doors, and he waits. Not because he is unaware, but because he is preparing a truth so undeniable, so searing, that no disguise can endure it. Exposure is not just about revealing facts, it is about revealing hearts. When God begins to expose, he does not simply uncover what was done, he unveils why it was done, the selfish motives, the arrogance, the coldness, the disregard for those they hurt. And that exposure burns, because it strips away the illusion of innocence. It forces the guilty to confront the reality they tried to hide, not just from others, but from themselves. Often, those who betray the pure believe they can rewrite the narrative. They think they can control perception. They manipulate, gaslight, and distract. But when God steps in, he removes the pen from their hands. The truth, which they tried so hard to bury, begins to rise like smoke. It finds its way into conversations. It reveals itself through consequences. And slowly, people begin to see what God always saw. The mask cracks, then shatters, and all that's left is the raw truth, undeniable, unpolished, and often unredeemable in the eyes of those they deceived. And here is where the justice becomes divine. The one they tried to bury, you, doesn't even have to fight for exposure. You don't have to dig up evidence. You don't have to prove your worth. God does it for you. Not in your time, but in his. And when he does it, it cannot be undone, because divine exposure is not a rumor, is not a whisper, it's a revelation. And when God exposes, he does it so clearly that even the betrayer cannot deny it. There is no safety in secrets when the Spirit of truth begins to move. There is no escape from the heat when the fire of God begins to consume falsehood. What once seemed hidden forever becomes headline in the spiritual realm. And everyone who once doubted you, who believed the betrayer's performance, will have no choice but to face what's real. Not because you shouted louder, but because God shined brighter. And the one who wore the mask for so long, they will burn under the weight of their own lies, because the truth is not just light, it is fire. There are wounds so deep that the world assumes they are final, pain so personal that others mistake it for your end. Betrayal carries a unique sting because it never comes from an enemy. It comes from someone close, someone trusted, someone who knew your soul and still chose to pierce it. That kind of pain doesn't just bruise the heart, it questions your very identity. And yet, God, in his divine wisdom, never allows pain to be wasted. What the betrayer meant to destroy you becomes the very place God begins to build you. The pain you endured was never random. It was the cracking open of a sacred foundation, one that God himself intended to fill with purpose. In your tears, God planted vision. In your heartbreak, he sowed strength. In your silence, he began to carve a platform. One that you didn't ask for, one you never imagined, but one that would carry the weight of your anointing. Because you cannot truly walk in divine purpose until you've walked through human pain. Pain has a strange way of revealing what comfort hides. It forces you to see things clearly, to identify false relationships, to let go of shallow attachments, to depend not on man, but on God. And in that breaking, something holy is born, a deeper compassion, a sharper discernment, a stronger identity. The betrayal wasn't the end of your purpose, it was the unlocking of it. It was the beginning of your transformation. And now, what was once your place of suffering becomes your place of power. God is not in the business of watching his people suffer without cause. If he allowed you to be broken, it's because he plans to rebuild you as something unshakable. And not just for your sake, but for others. Your scars become your testimony. Your story becomes someone else's survival guide. Your life becomes evidence that God lifts up the pure, the humble, the wounded, and places them in positions of influence, not in spite of their pain, but because of it. You are not rising to prove anything to the ones who left you. You are rising because your destiny demands it. And every tear, every moment of despair, every silent scream that you thought no one heard, heaven did. God gathered it all and molded it into a divine assignment, one that will speak louder than your words, one that will heal others because you allowed God to heal you first. So while the betrayer walks in circles of regret, you walk in lanes of purpose. While they burn with the fire of what they lost, you burn with the fire of what God is building in you. Your pain was real, but your calling is greater. And God, in his sovereignty, has used the fire they set to refine you, not ruin you. You have been prepared in private, but now God is calling you to stand, to speak, to live out what you were meant to be. You are not broken, you are being built. You are not forgotten, you are being positioned. You are not alone. You are walking with the one who turns pain into purpose. And the ones who betrayed you, they will witness your rise not from the center of your life, but from the sidelines, not as companions, but as cautionary tales. And their regret will burn not because of your revenge, but because of God's justice. The pure soul they tried to bury has become the voice they can no longer silence. What they did to you was cruel, it was calculated, it was meant to break you in a way you could never recover from. But God never left. He saw everything, the betrayal, the tears, the confusion, the silence. He heard the words you whispered through broken prayers. He felt the ache in your chest when you tried to act like you were okay. And he took notes, not for punishment alone, but for restoration. You see, this was never just about their betrayal. It was about your becoming. The pain was real, but so is the purpose. The tears were many, but so will be the blessings. They betrayed a pure soul, and in doing so they awakened a fire they can no longer escape. God is not just healing you. He's using your story. He's crafting a testimony so powerful that it will silence every lie, every slander, every false accusation they ever launched against you. Their regret will burn like fire, not because you cursed them, but because they touched what was sacred. They betrayed someone chosen, and now their peace is gone, their rest disturbed, their conscience haunted. Meanwhile, you are rising, quietly, powerfully, with grace, with dignity, with divine favor, because that's how God responds to betrayal. He doesn't just restore, he elevates, he vindicates, and he makes sure everyone sees it. So walk forward now, not with bitterness, but with holy confidence. You are not who they said you were. You are who God says you are. And that is why their regret burns, because they lost what they'll never find again, a pure soul touched by God.